There we go. That's better. Right, I'm back, everybody. So forgive me for that. Lovely, well, lovely. You can't have technology without the inevitable hitch that goes with it. But I tell you, Travel Begins at 40, Life Begins at 40 was originally a self-help book that was written in 1932 by Walter Pitkin at a time when there was a rapid increase in life expectancy. People were suddenly realizing that health and well-being was something worthy of celebration. And Mark Bibby Jackson is a very treasured author of and sponsor behind Travel Begins at 40.com, the website for travel and inspiration. Blogging and travel writing has evolved enormously, I think we'll all agree, over the last 10 years. And this is our opportunity to start something new and hear from a master in the art of travel writing. And we're very, very flattered that Mark has agreed to host this masterclass. For anyone that has ever wanted to explore the world in words, then I'll just pass you over to the Lord and Master himself, Mark Bibby Jackson, and say thank you, Mark, for what we're about to learn.
Okay, thank you for that massive build-up. Yes, so as James said, Mark Bibby Jackson and Travel Writing Masterclass, as it says on the screen. So Andrew, do you want to pop onto the next thing? So if people want to make any comments, ask any questions, I'm very happy to take them as we go along. Or if you want to save them for the end, or if you want to email me the questions afterwards, you can as well. We can continue the conversation after this Zoom meeting. But first of all, just a bit about me. I've just joined the British Guild of Travel Writers, which is something I do recommend to anybody in Britain to join the organisation. It's very good. It has lots of meetings like this with fellow travel journalists, so you can swap ideas and find out the latest developments. Like today, we had a meeting about cruise liners and exactly what the policy is on cruise liners and over 50 travel. Yesterday was a debate about Caribbean tourism and exactly what the policy is now for the countries there. So just a quick plug for the British Guild of Travel Writers there. Anyway, I launched the website Travel Begins at 40 back in 2017. And I also have my own media company. I spend a lot of my time in Cambodia. So again, if anybody wants to have any advice or any questions at all about Cambodia, then please just send me an email. And Andrew, if you go to the next slide, you see my email address there, bibby@travelbegins@40.com. So you can just email me there. But if we, as I say, just fire through any questions when you want to in the chat thing on the side. But the aim of this workshop is really just to give you a helping hand to start you on the process of travel writing. So if it's, hopefully it's not too simplistic, but if it is, then I apologize. It's really just an introductory workshop. And as I say, if you want to carry on, if you want to ask any questions, we can do that later. So Andrew, next slide, please. So in this workshop, we're going to start off with why we write travel blogs in the first place. Then we'll go on to the different types of travel writing. Then a couple of really important elements, which are, first of all, how to know your audience. So how important it is to know who you're writing for. Sometimes people forget about that. Then sometimes people write for themselves, which is not necessarily the best commercial way of going. How to get the right angle for your travel piece. How to start writing. And the structure, good structure of a blog or a feature article, and also good style. So, next slide, please. So why do we write a travel blog in the first place? There's lots of different forms of writing, and nowadays probably just an Instagram post is the most common form of travel writing that you get. Lots of us, all we really want to do is share our experiences with friends and family. And some of you, no doubt, are forced to write. I'm sure some of you actually find writing a very uncomfortable experience. I'm fortunate, I both love traveling and I love writing. So for me, I don't understand your hardship in having to be forced to write, but sometimes I'm sure some of you, you're sent on a jolly by your boss, and your payment has to be that you've got to write about it so that whoever's hosting you gets some coverage for their resort or for the travel company or whoever it is. Some of you might be fortunate enough to be a travel blogger, and you might be able to travel around the world for 2 years, which I've met numerous people who've done that. It can be done, and obviously writing for your blog is a means of doing that. For that, you really have to be quite tech savvy. For the rest of us, and for the massive, the whole sector of travel writing, hopefully the intention is really to inspire people to follow in our footsteps and to give you fresh ideas on where to go and what to do when you get there. Andrew, next slide, please. So, as I said at the beginning, you need to know your audience. So if you don't know who you're writing for, you don't know what to write. My website is quite clear. It's an over 40 audience. If you were to write about clubbing in Ibiza, maybe for some actually it would be okay, but for some people it just wouldn't be right for them. Whereas, as I say here, about going on the Tour de Louvre or something more classical sites in ancient Greece, something like that would be far more our market. When you are arranging your trip, you should take this into account. You have to make sure you line up the right experiences for your audience. And sometimes your trip will be organized by travel PR, and they will arrange the trip for you. Make sure that you include in the activities you do experiences which are actually of interest to the people you're writing for, rather than necessarily experiences for you. And a good tip to do is sometimes, well, it's always a good idea unless you are commissioned and you work for one company. So if you're a freelance travel journalist, you should always try to conceive more than one article on a trip. So if you can get 2 or 3 articles off the one trip and sell it to 2 or 3 different publications, then that's certainly going to work out far better for you commercially. So always work at that. So you can arrange different activities to appeal for different audiences and for different markets. Andrew, next slide, please. So a few quick things about the basics of travel writing. Clearly, as in all writing, you have news. You have, obviously at the moment, there's a lot about insurance. There's a lot about countries you can travel to. So there's a lot of travel related news. You have opinion pieces. So you have your TripAdvisor type reviews, but you also have editorial pieces. So that would be your opinion pieces on the future of travel is a key one at the moment. You know, what should be the shape, the direction of travel. We often have travel roundups. So you have those 7 things to pack before you go traveling around the world by bicycle, or 6 national parks in, you know, Botswana or whatever. So they always have these roundup things. But what I want to focus on today is features, feature articles, so travel features. Andrew, next one, please. And for any writing, hopefully most of you know this already, it's the W's and that one little H somewhere in the middle down at the bottom. These are the building blocks of any piece of writing. So you have to know your who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how. And it's always a good idea to think of that before you start writing and while you're planning your travel piece. So the who hopefully is going to be you. It's normally about your experience. It doesn't have to be. You can often interview somebody out where you're traveling and get ideas from them and do an interview of their experiences. Where is clearly going to be where you're traveling to, your travel destination. When could be important, high season, low season. How, probably not very important on travel writing unless you're taking the Orient Express, or the actual the means of getting there is more important than where you go to. Why, I think, is quite interesting. I think you should always ask why. So if you ask for yourself, why are you traveling to this destination in the first place? What are your expectations before you go there? Because that's where you start to get a 3-dimensional element to your writing. You get a sense of the past. You get a depth to the writing, which is one of the points I'm going to come on to in a moment. But for now, we're going to focus on the most important one, the what. So next slide, please, Andrew. So what are you going to write about? Now, we come back to knowing your audience. If you don't know your audience, then you don't know what you're going to be writing about. You have to write about what they will find interesting in what you've done on your travel. So it's not necessarily what you find the most interesting thing, but it's got to be what's relevant for that audience. And the key thing to do with this one is to do your research. You can do your research as easily as anything just by Googling the destination and finding out ideas. You can arrange trips, so culinary trips of people who arrange it in the country before you set off. Or you can do research while you're out there. Everyone's got access to a computer, so it's very, very simple to do. But one of the most important ways of doing your research is to chat to local people. Now, hopefully, one of the things we all like to do when we're going traveling is to chat to people. It could be go down a bar, it could be going to a restaurant, it could be any way you want to. You chat to locals, perhaps they arrange a trip for you, so you have a sightseeing trip arranged around the destination. The one thing for sure is that they are going to have far more knowledge about the destination you go to than you are. They live there. So that will give a gain. It gives a heck of a lot more color to your piece rather than just, this is what I did on my holiday. And the final thing is really to have fun. I always think that it's an underrated thing in writing. As I say, lots of you probably feel as this is a bit of a chore to write, but if you can actually enjoy yourself while writing, then the chances are that your readers will enjoy what you're writing as well. So try to have that fun. And if you can get some humor into your writing, that's always good, although that's often one of the hardest things people find. Andrew, next slide. So hopefully you've got your idea of what you're going to write about. You've done your traveling. You got to sit down. What do you start writing about? Now, my first tip on this is really about screenplay. So if any of you've ever studied how to write screenplays, there's a golden rule, which is enter late and leave early. And every single movie ever made has used that principle. So the concept is linear is a very, very boring narrative structure. Often with thrillers and films, you'll start with the murder, then you go back in time to find out what led up to the murder, to get all your suspects, the background, to have the death, and then you finish in the future when you find out who actually did the murder, or maybe not. They get caught, and you have the denouement, the thing. It's exactly the same with travel writing. If you start with you're packing your bags, you're going onto the bus, or you're taking a taxi to the airport or whatever, and you end coming back, that would be the most boring travel piece ever. So don't do that. Always break up the narrative by going backwards and forwards. You don't have to start at the beginning. And remember, all stories have a past, a present, and the future. So my tip for you in this one is just imagine that box of chocolates you get maybe at Christmas or something like that. And hopefully some of you at least have got brothers and sisters. I've got one brother. And you have to fight for who has the favorite chocolate in that box. Now, some of you might leave the chocolate till the end, but if you've got a sibling who's a bit stronger than you, or maybe a bit more persuasive, you're going to end up with that chocolate you really don't like. You're going to end up with the strawberry cream or whatever at the bottom of the box. It's exactly the same with travel writing. The place to start is with your most memorable experience. If you remember it best, then hopefully your audience is going to enjoy it equally as much as you. The one proviso, of course, is it's got to be appropriate for your audience. So think of the thing you enjoyed the most and start there. Andrew, next slide. So this is what I like. It's not necessarily anything to do with travel, but it's a quote about Sesame Street. So Sesame Street lied. America's not full of black and white kids all learning together in a multiracial harmony. Down in LA, big birds toting an AK and the Cookie Monsters doing crack. I challenge anybody not to want to read the next paragraph. And so whenever you're writing, that's exactly what you're aiming for. The hook is a hook. The intro is a hook. So you try to get the people to get on and to carry on reading what you're writing. That's all you're trying to do with your intro, with your hook. Next slide. And there really are quite easy ways of doing this. So there's really only a few ways you really can start a travel piece or any feature piece. This applies to any feature. You can start with a strong or intriguing statement. So Andrew, can you just go back to the previous slide? Sesame Street lied. Strong. It's a very, very strong statement. That's your intro. You got people hooked immediately. Andrew, can you go forward back to the next one? Yeah, thanks. So that's one way you can start. For me, I normally start with an anecdote. Right at the beginning of this, James started with an anecdote to introduce me. That's how the whole conversation started. It's a normal travel piece. It's what I do. When I write, I normally do an anecdote. That's my style. I find myself doing it all the time. But very often people prefer to go into a more scene setting or descriptive piece. So you'll be describing the beautiful water you're swimming through, or maybe you're talking about the volcano you're climbing up, or the food you're eating, or however you describe that, and you really get into that image of what you're eating or what you're doing, and that's how you start the whole. That's how you hook your audience. So that's normally the start to a travel piece. And there's two other ways which are not very often used. You can start with a question. You can ask a question of your audience, of your reader, particularly if you're doing a roundup piece. That's obviously a normal way of doing that. But I would suggest you don't really start with a question unless you're really, really confident. And the other way, you can start with a quote from somebody. So if you meet somebody in your travels and they come up with this great line, and it somehow encapsulates the whole trip and the whole experiences you're going through, why not start with that and then lead on from that for the rest of your story? Next slide, please. So this is something, it's the easiest thing in the world for you to do. It's something you can do at home. You just have to get on the internet or pick up a color magazine and some sort of travel supplement or anything. Just read the first paragraph. Don't read anything else, just read the intro. Go through 6, 7, 8 different, whatever, it doesn't matter. Just read the opening paragraph and then think, do I want to read on? Yes, no. If you want to carry on reading, it's worked. If it doesn't make you want to carry on reading, it hasn't worked. So for that, you can see what works for you, which type of intros you like, and then you can start using that type of intro, that style, as a format for you to start your pieces. It's really rather simple, to be honest. Okay, next slide. And structure, simplest structure in the world. As in everything comes in threes: beginning, middle, and end. So that's a really simple structure, and that's really what you're doing in the travel writing. It's not a lot more complicated than that. But in the next slide, we have a slightly more complex structure. So we've already talked about the intro. So you've got your intro, you've got a good hook. What you can then do, I've mentioned before about having a depth to your article to make it three-dimensional. You have something called a context paragraph. It doesn't have to be a paragraph, it doesn't have to be the next paragraph, but by giving a context, something about the culture that you're visiting, the civilization, the cuisine, anything, by giving a greater perspective to your piece, you make it more three-dimensional, and it's less about what I did on my holiday. But then the most important paragraph, again, it doesn't have to be a paragraph, it can just be a sentence. It doesn't have to be the third paragraph, but the most important paragraph is the nub paragraph. Because what this does, it tells you where we're going. So like in the presentation at the beginning, there was a slide which said, this is what I'm going to be talking about today. You should inform your reader where you're going. Preferably not by saying this is where we're going, but you do that near the beginning of your article. And then after that, you just put in body paragraphs, which is a series of travel experiences. So you have 3 or 4 different travel experiences, which you hook together, and also you link together. And that's your piece. And then you conclude it with a conclusion, not just end it. So if anybody studied news, the major difference between news writing and feature writing, but the major differences are the beginning and the end. So, and the end of a feature piece, about a travel piece, is you conclude rather than just finish. And we'll come on to that in a second, but next slide, please. So for me, and if you learn nothing today, then this is the one lesson. Travel writing is just like dancing. So if you're a good dancer, you should be able to write travel pieces. Unfortunately for me, I'm a terrible dancer and I've got 2 left feet. So it's a bit of a problem. Imagine a tango. A tango, I think, is the perfect example, or is the perfect metaphor for, similarly for travel writing. What you do is you lead your you lead your reader around the piazza by the hand, and you go on a tango, dance around, and then at the end, you deposit them back where you started and you say goodbye. You can go backwards and forwards in time while traveling, while writing, in the same way as in dancing a tango, you go forwards and then you go back with your steps. And the rhythm of a tango, the rhythm of writing, just like the rhythm of tango, is about going forwards and about going backwards. So you have quick and slow. And it's very easy how you change the pace, change the rhythm of the article. Because if you want it to go quickly, you use short sentences, short words. If you want it to go slowly, you use long sentences and long words. It's as simple as that. So Andrew, if you can go back to the Sesame Street slide. Again, you can just see there. The first sentence is 3 words long. The last sentence, I counted it today, is 14. You can take my word for it. And maybe I miscounted, but please don't bother with how many. But you can see the first sentence is very short. The last sentence is longer. The beginning, Sesame Street lied. Very simple, very abrupt, very short, very quick. But then you get into a phrase like multiracial harmony. Far longer, far slower. So by mixing the long and the short, you get quick, so you get slow and you get quick. So you get a rhythm the same way as you get a rhythm in dancing through the length of words and the length of sentences you use. Andrew, can you go back to the side we were just on? That's it, yeah, that one. Okay, so what you're doing at the end of your article, hopefully just like a dance, is that you enrich the reader by this experience. It's an experience they enjoy. So at the end of it, they feel enriched, although unfortunately, you probably won't turn out to be much richer at the end of it yourself, because travel writing doesn't normally pay particularly well. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, I don't know if you can you see this one? Andrew, can you zoom in to make it bigger? Because I can't read it. So this is an article I wrote, and the idea behind this is just to focus on the beginning and the end. Can you? I don't know if people can read it, but the beginning, if I can read it, it starts off, I didn't know what to expect. Images of Anthony Hopkins playing Dr. Kellogg in the road to Wellville, sorry, merged bizarrely with Carry On Camping. So I can't even read it with my glasses on. Okay, that's the next slide. So hopefully you can see that. So the first paragraph, I referred to Dr. Kellogg in the road to Wellville. Then if we go across to the other side and you look at the end, you see the final paragraph, the one that starts, whether I will still feel this. Again, I then go, the approach of Kamalaya is both holistic and slow. Unlike Dr. Kellogg, there is no magic wand of fasting followed by colonic irrigation and ice cold bath. So what I've done here is I've led you back to the beginning of the article. I haven't repeated the opening paragraph. What I've done is I've echoed the opening paragraph with the final paragraph. And for me, that's the perfect way to finish. I'm not saying this is the perfect article. It certainly isn't. It's not, certainly not one of my favorites, but it does demonstrate how you can finish at the beginning. And in the process, you can, you sort of mark out to people, we've now finished, and also you're basically echoing it. So there's a nice top and tail to the whole article. It's a nice sense of conclusion to the whole piece. As I say, you always conclude. In news, you just finish. In features, in travel pieces, you conclude. Okay, Andrew, next slide, please. Okay, and so the final thing is really about style. The good thing about style is it's just keep it simple. It's something that has always been said. It's very, very, very long established that the best English is simple English. And this applies to travel as it does to anything else. If you think you can just make a travel piece sound more interesting by throwing a lot of adjectives and adverbs at it, then I'm afraid it's a bit like cooking when you use a lot of artificial colorings and preservatives in it. You know, you should use the proper ingredients to create a good piece of travel writing. The same way as to cook well, you have to have the right ingredients. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can listen to Mark Twain or to Elmore Leonard, two far better writers than I will ever be. Keep your English simple. Next slide, please, Andrew. So George Orwell very handily gave us 6 rules on how to write. And the first one is really saying never use a cliche. So if you heard the metaphor before, don't use it. It's a cliche, it's tired. Second one is never use a long word when you can use a short one instead. Third, if you can cut a word, cut it, get rid of it. Fourth, you probably all know this one, never use the passive, use the active. Don't use foreign phrases, scientific words or jargon. And the last one, of course, break the rules when you need to. So you might need to use longer words in order to change the rhythm of the piece, in order to get the flow better. So don't be worried about breaking the rules, but know the rules before you break them. And the other thing I would say is don't show off. Hopefully we've all got a relatively good grasp of vocabulary. We can use quite long words if we really want to. That's not what you're supposed to do. Simple English, that's the best English. Don't show off when you're writing. Okay, next slide, please. So what we tried to do with writing was the aim for simple prose. And the golden rules are plainness, economy, precision, and clarity. That is what every good writer, hopefully, is aiming to achieve. And the way that you realize whether you've achieved this or not is very simple. You read it out aloud. And if you're embarrassed about reading it out, then read it aloud in your head, if that doesn't sound too sort of one flew over the cuckoo's nest. But that's what you should be doing, because it's only through hearing the sound of the words that you've written that you can get the sense of the rhythm of your writing, and also where you can understand how complex it is. If you can't understand what you're saying in your head, how on earth can your reader be expected to understand it? You'll find out that when people start blustering, it's because they don't know what they're talking about. And politicians are the absolute experts in this. Whenever they don't know what they're saying, they keep on saying it again and again and again. All parties, not just one party. So if it's not clear to you, then rewrite it. You have to make sure, because if you don't understand it, they ain't going to understand it. And the final thing, and it doesn't really fit in this bit, but be honest. Quite often certainly when I set up a magazine in Cambodia, writers would self-censor themselves. They'd write nice things about advertisers because they thought that's what advertisers wanted. If you're writing, you write the truth. You don't say something's gorgeous when something's just all right or tasty or nice or good, or what, don't use the word nice, but something like that. So always be honest. You should be honest about your experience, about whether it's good or bad, and honest about how you felt about the whole experience, because that's what will come through in your writing and people will believe you. If you're not honest, they won't believe you. Okay, next slide, please. So those of you who've managed to stay until the end, you have a not an at all impossible mission for you to complete. And so I'm asking everyone to write a travel article, and I'll publish the best, not the worst. I won't embarrass anybody. There'll be no shaming. I'll publish the best on our website. Unfortunately, I don't have a budget for this, but thankfully James does. So he's kindly offered to give a bottle of wine to the winner. And it's very simple. You're writing for my website, so that's Travel Begins at 40. So you have to think of our audience, and our audience is 40 plus travelers. We tend to avoid cruises and golf courses. So we tend to do ethical and responsible, but anything that would appeal to the 40 plus traveler. 800 words, and we need photos. And if you send it through to me so Bibby at travelbeginsat40.com, deadline 30th of September. And as I say, we'll publish the winner. Okay, final slide, please, Andrew. So this is what we've covered. So why you write, know your audience, how to start writing, structure of a travel piece, always use plain English. And the most important lesson of all is enjoy your writing. Okay, thank you.